Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl podcast, which is all about motivating and inspiring you. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. The Tough Girl podcast is sponsorship and ad-free, and that's thanks to the monthly financial support of patrons. To find out more about supporting the Tough Girl podcast, then please go and visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast, and help me to increase the amount of female role models in the media. Take action now and become one of the patrons. All patrons will get their name on a dedicated patrons page on the Tough Girl website, and all female patrons at $5 and above are invited to join the closed Facebook group, the Tough Girl Tribe. Today, I'm absolutely delighted that we're catching up with Jenny Graham, who's going to be sharing more about becoming the fastest woman to cycle around the world with a new Guinness record of 124 days, 10 hours and 50 minutes.
I'm Jenny Graham. I'm a 39-year-old woman from the Highlands of Scotland. I'm a mum to a 20-year-old son, which I have to nip myself sometimes when I see him. Can't quite believe it. And I am an adventure rider.
Did you grow up in the Highlands of Scotland?
Yes, I did. Yes, I'm born and bred in Inverness, and I moved away and I moved around quite a bit in my sort of 20s, and then came back. I guess when Lachlan was going to school, when Lachlan started school, then that was sort of settle down point. And his dad and I are both from the Highlands, so we were keen that he was brought up here.
Were you quite adventurous? Were you always into cycling and biking?
I think I was quite adventurous, but I wasn't always into cycling. I think I was always up for a bit of an epic, and I was always up for a good laugh, and that used to look like, in different things. But I've just now taken that sort of epics and laughs into my cycling. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. When did you get into cycling then?
So I remember starting to cycle. I remember learning to ride a bike, and I always had a BMX when I was younger. And I remember getting my first bike one Christmas, and so like bikes had always been in my life. And I remember a time, we didn't have a car. We lived in town, but we didn't have a car, so we'd just cycle everywhere. So commuting by bike and sort of getting around was always in my life. But I didn't really know about bikes for sports, if you know what I mean, which sounds ridiculous now, but when I was younger, I didn't know that people did it for a hobby, I don't think. And I was probably quite late until I clicked onto that. Like I was in my 20s before I learned to mountain bike. That was the sort of introduction to it. So I was like 24.
But I don't think the thing is that going back then, like there wouldn't have been that many. You wouldn't see that many female role models sort of in the media. You might not see them on TV or hear about them in radio. You wouldn't actually necessarily know that women did that, or unless you were really involved in that community. So I don't think it's strange. I
think I didn't know anybody did it. It's not that I thought it was a man's sport. It's just that I remember there was a man down the road from me. He had a Dalmatian dog and he had a racer bike. And I know it's a racer bike now, but at the time it was just like a bike with funny handlebars. And he would cycle everywhere when he wasn't with his dog. And I used to think like, oh, he's obsessed. But I never thought, oh, that's his hobby. It's just like, oh, he goes faster. He's on his bike a lot. So yeah, it just wasn't in my world. But when I learned to mountain bike, oh boy, that was just incredible. I took to that straight away. I instantly loved mountain biking.
What was it that you loved about mountain biking?
I think it was the challenge. Like I loved that there was places. There was areas very close to where I lived, so I could leave the house on my bike and go and explore places that I knew as being, from being a kid and from walking around, but it was like another dimension to a place that I felt like I already knew really well. So that was like the first part, and then I started going like further away from home and discovering new places. And I think when I started going in, like I did my first couple of trips that was using a bike to like into a bothy or using the bike to get into the hills, then I was like, wow, this sense of like, freedom and adventure that you get from riding a bike in those places. That's what really got me, I think.
God, that sounds incredible, especially like riding out to Bothies in Scotland and like,
No.
staying overnight, just stunning and beautiful.
I know, that's it. And well, I'd gone to college, you see, and it was a like introduction to outdoor activities, which I didn't really know at the time what that was, but they said that they were going to go skiing to France, in the January, and the course started in the January, and I was like, what? You can actually join this course and go skiing, and I'd always wanted to learn to ski. So yeah, so it was so I just sort of went along, and little did I know that it would actually be life-changing, like a life-changing 6 months.
Tell us more about that course.
Yeah, so at this point I had my son Lachlan. He'd gone to school, and he just started school or just started nursery. He was young, and there was an advert in the paper, in the local paper, just saying, it was a brand new course at the college, and it was sort of worded like, do you like, navigating up hills and jumping in rivers and skiing, and it had the sort of examples of things like adventure things that you might like doing. Then get in touch. And I'd been in the army cadets when I was a kid, like a teenager, and I loved the adventure side of things, and it just something clicked, like there'd just been a seed that had been planted back in the cadet days, that when I read that, a 24-year-old me was like, hang on a minute, yeah, I love all that stuff. And so I got in touch with the college, because it was a brand new course, I got into it. Like, reality is, if it, a couple of years later, I probably wouldn't have got on the course because I wouldn't have been qualified enough, or I wouldn't have had enough of a background in it. But because it was brand new and they were testing it out and we were being guinea pigs, then they let me on with like no previous experience. Thank goodness,
That's fantastic. What happened next then? Did the course allow you to get sort of more qualifications in the outdoors, and what did you learn from it?
So the course was set up like for instructors, really wannabe instructors, but I didn't want to be an instructor. I just wanted to do the stuff. Like, I was actually getting introduced to these things. So it was only a 6-month course, but it was long enough for me to be like, I want this in my life. Like, I have to have these things in my life. So we did like hill walking, mountain biking, skiing, kayaking, canoeing. We were like going all around the Highlands, and just like there was like 8 people in the course, and 2 days out and about being practical. So I just knew at the end of that I needed it in my life, but I wasn't very sure how to get it, because, like none of my network of people, like nobody was in the outdoors. I didn't know anybody that was living that life. I don't think I had anyone at all. It was like that feeling that you knew that you couldn't let go of that, but there wasn't another course starting for another year. So they were taking what they learned from that one and then developing a longer course. So I had a year's gap to fill in. So I phoned up everywhere. I phoned up everywhere in the yellow pages that was close to that was doable for collecting Lachlan from school, like that I could do within a school day, and just asked if I could volunteer with them. And that, I knew the basics, like I knew how to load a trailer, I knew how to sort the kit out that we needed. So I could be helpful, but I couldn't, like, I wouldn't be an instructor. I didn't feel like I could look after people, but I just wanted the experience. I wanted to be able to get hold of the kit so as I could go out and do the activities, because that was a major stumbling block. Like, if you love canoeing, then it actually takes quite a lot of, like, you have to have quite a lot of resources to go canoeing in the first place. So it was like just sort of learning about what was available. And so nobody wanted to take me on. And then I phoned this place back a couple of times. It was the Outdoor Education Centre, and it was just like about 15 miles out of town, and they had a lottery funded project that was working with young people that were out of mainstream. Oh no, they were still in mainstream education, but they were at risk of being out of mainstream education. So they called the Outdoor Education Response Team. And they would go around the Highlands working with groups on a 4-week rolling program that, would just give them introductions, these kids introductions. And it was less about the activities and more about the relationships that you're building and the skills that the young people are gaining from it. So they'd already turned me down for volunteering, but I phoned up again and I got a different guy on the phone. I got this man, Ron, who I'm still friends with now, and Ron Woodark, and he said, yeah, sure, come on out. He was totally open to it. He was running the program, and from there I got a job volunteering with them, and they would pay me in with kit, so I would get a kit allowance at the end of the season. I mean, it ran all year, but every 4 months or something, I'd get a canoe paddle, or I got a pair of skis out of it, and I just managed to build up my kit by volunteering, but also build up all these skills. And because I was working with that young people, I loved it. I loved that bit about the job the most, probably the relationship building and the teamwork aspect, and just being about the softer skills rather than the harder skills. I mean, that was something I was good at anyway. I could do that anyway, so I fitted in quite well, and I continued on that path. That was the path that I continued on for sort of 12 years, working with young people, and using the outdoors as a way of engaging with them.
So how are you, because you had a young child at this point who's in school, how are you funding your life at that point?
I had a part-time job in, I just had loads of little part-time jobs, and I was working in an outdoor shop. Once I'd been to college, I was working in an outdoor shop, and then I went back to college, and then I would have got a grant at that time, and then I would have picked up another job. Oh no, I think I went to Craigdawn after that, and I'd be working in restaurants or bars and through the day, and just sort of working it out with Lachlan's dad. So it was, with childcare and stuff like that. I was juggling a lot, but I was early 20s, and you can juggle anything in your 20s. You've got so much energy. It's it was a big task, but it was a fun one.
That's incredible. So you're gaining these new skills, you're building up your network, you're finding sort of mentors and supporters. Thank you, Ron. Sometimes that's all you need is one person can change the direction of your life. So 12 years working with young people, absolutely incredible. Tell us more about when you started to go further with your cycling, when you started to realize hold on, this is amazing. I'm really good at this. And B, I want to go further and I want to go faster, and let's see how far that you could actually go.
So I guess it grew as Lachlan, my son, grew up and grew more independent. Then your time as a parent, you've by this point, his dad and I had already separated, so you've already got some extra time that you wouldn't have it perhaps if you were one unit. So Lachlan would go and stay with his dad every second weekend. So then I had every second weekend that I could be out and about on the hill, and sort of that's what I poured all my time into eventually. And then as he got older, then these 2-hour mountain bike rides could be 4 or 5 or 6 hour mountain bike rides. So it kind of grew with Lachlan's independence. And I think I found the endurance side of things I found first on the hill. So really keen hill walker and scrambler, and I was training up to get my qualification, to take people out on the hill, and I was doing loads and loads of hills, and I just found that actually I would be a bit slower at the start of the day, but I could actually keep going for hours and hours and hours, and I would go on these massive big epics and multi-day things out in the hills. And I think that's when I realised that I had quite good endurance, that I had naturally, I had this sort of tractor engine that could keep going at the same pace all day. But I would never, ever win the sprint race.
Tell us about the Highland Trail 550.
Yeah, I guess that was the turning point for biking. So, well, that and Velocity Cafe and Workshop. So I I had saw a job. So there's this cafe and workshop and sort of community hub in Inverness, and it was brand new at the time. And it was there was a job advertising it to be a cycle officer that was going into schools and getting more people on bikes. And I applied for it. So I was already working with the council with young people in the outdoors, and I applied to go part-time at that job and got this job at Velocity. So once I got the job at Velocity, it just like opened up this door of like this network of people, bike people. And it was at that point that I switched, I guess, from the hill stuff to biking stuff. So, and I mean, the mountain biking is still hill things, but my sort of goals and focus went from hill walking and climbing to being on the bike, because that's the new sort of group of people I was meeting, and they were doing really cool things, and I wanted to get involved in that. And then not long after I started there, I came across the Highland Trail 550, which is a bikepacking individual time trial, which is in the Highlands of Scotland. So basically 550 miles. There's a group start, like suggested start time. Folk get themselves along there, and then for the next 550 miles, however long it takes you, like you are on your own. Like your main mission is just getting back to the finish line, and you can sleep when you want, you can eat when you want, you can if you have any mechanicals, you have to fix them yourself. There's no support out there, and there's no checkpoints or anything like that. So that really appealed to me, because it took what I'd learned on the hill, and it took like all the skills that of mountaineering, and then it was taking them into mountain biking, which I loved as well. So it was like merging my two passions.
You've had this experience, 550 miles, but when did you start thinking about the world and trying to break the world record for cycling around the world?
It's worth mentioning, the first time I did the Highland Trail, I failed spectacularly. I just had a total mission at one of the big rivers. I couldn't get over it for like 27 hours or something, and then I got over it, and I finished, like I quit the race 8 days in, with still like 150 miles to go, and like my ankles, I couldn't even walk on them. The weather was horrendous that year, really, really bad. And I was in a mess, and that was my first ever attempt at it. And I mean, I came home, I couldn't walk for a couple of weeks afterwards. I was in such a state. But something got me, something really got me. And I was like, I have to go back and do that. Like, I have to go back and complete that. That was insane. I loved it. I learned so much from it. So from there, it just sort of started spiraling. I guess I was training for the next year's Highland Trail and for the one after that. And I'd got a road bike, so I could train, so I could be training through the week, and it not take so much out of me, and I could do longer miles. And I think when I got the road bike, that was a game changer, because the miles that I could do on the road bike were like, it was insane. I couldn't believe it. And so I would set myself more and more road challenges, always with the aim of mountain biking, being fitter for mountain biking at the end, really. So I never classed myself as a roadie at all, never raced in any road races, never went out with a club or anything like that. And then I was chasing the miles though. So I was doing these miles, and I would just go out at the weekend and be like, right, I'm going to go and do that. And it was like, 150 miles or 200 miles. I would just go out and do it in the day, like by myself, or a month to talk a friend into it. But it was just really, really buzzing for it, and what my body could do. And so I was sort of going through this process of wondering what my body could do and my mind could do, and how much fitter I could get myself. And I went away on an Adventure Syndicate training camp. So now I'm one of the directors of the Adventure Syndicate, but at the time I just went along as a participant. Like, I knew Lee and Emily, who had set the Adventure Syndicate up, and I knew quite a lot of the lassies that were involved in it, and they were running a training camp in January, and I was training to go away to Arizona. So I went along in the training camp. I managed to get like they were offering, like I had no money to go on it at that point. I was so skint. It was just after Christmas, but they were offering bursary places to get onto it. So I applied and I got a bit of a discount. So I was like, right, great. I got myself off there, and then I met this coach called John Hampshire, and when I left Spain, he got in touch with me and he was like, look, I love your attitude, I love what you're doing, and I'd like to offer you a year's free coaching. Now, you don't need to do anything with this. Like, you don't, you might not even want it, it's fine. But if you do, then I'll work with you free for a year just to see like what might be possible, And well, that was it then, wasn't it? I was just like, I have to make the very best of this opportunity. I knew the work that I was doing, as much as I loved it, I didn't want to take it any further. I wasn't interested in, going in any training courses and progressing in my work, in my sort of work that I was doing at the time. But I was only buzzing for cycling and endurance. So I was like, well, Lachlan had left school at that point. He was working full time, and I was like, well, this is it. Like, this is your opportunity to go and do something, like to actually go and, test yourself out and see what you can do. And so that process, like, it took quite a long time. It wasn't like, oh, I've got this right, I need to think of something good to do with it. It was like over a few months, I suppose, this was whirling mind and making that decision, like, of that life direction that I was going to pursue. It was only when I went to Arizona and I raced out in Arizona, and that was my first time in America. I'd been in Europe and stuff, and always sort of with people or on like family holidays and stuff. So it was like quite a big deal going off to America by yourself to go to a start line that you didn't know anybody on, and I think it must have given me quite a lot of confidence doing that. And so when I got back from there, I started looking at what I could do the following year with the help of John. And that's when the Round the World record came up. And I was checking it out, and it was like, I actually think that I can do the miles, but I don't know if I've got the bottle to put myself out there and say that I can to everybody, like for everybody to be able to judge me. And if I can't do it, like the fear of failing, and the feel of that, like somehow being a loser or being a failure for giving it a go, it was massive. Like, it was massive. Like, people that I knew that were doing that stuff had different backgrounds from me. I mean, they weren't single mums when they were 20. They weren't they weren't working class. They weren't there were so many things that got in my way, or could have got in my way. I suppose they didn't, that I had to work through, of telling myself that, no, you are good enough. You do deserve a place on that start line, Jen. It was like working through that was really difficult.
I'd love to dig into that in some more detail, actually. It's a lot of fears that you've uncovered, putting yourself out there, mm-hmm. and, whether you can do it, and also being judged for doing this, for attempting it, for trying it. How did you work through those thoughts? How did you change your mindset?
I was very focused and very driven. Like, when I look back, obviously I have chilled right out now. I am on chill out mode. But at the time, I I'd have these thoughts and worries, and I mean, it's just absolute imposter syndrome, isn't it? Of not being good enough. And I would sort of work through it like, okay, what are you asking yourself to do? Okay, I'm asking myself, am I able to ride that miles every day? Well, actually, the reality of it is, yes, I think I probably could ride the miles every day, because I've already proven in all these other things that I do for fun, this is my life, this is what I spend my whole life doing, all my spare time doing. And so you love doing it, and that you can put the miles in, and that you've got a pretty good determined personality, you know, like I find it hard once I've set my goals on something. I find it hard to back off. Even if I'm not hitting my own expectations, I would normally keep going to the end. You know, I looked back in my experience and it was like, well, this is what you're showing at the moment. So is that so you can almost like tick that one off, you know, like you don't have to worry about that bit because you've sort of proven that you've put the miles in, you've put the effort in, you're going to be working with John for another year. Okay, so that's just a fear, that's not real, that's not a real thing. So then you could check that off. And then it's like all the other things would come down to the worry of what other people would think and the worry of like other people's judgments. I would just eventually be like, well, that's not a good enough reason not to do something. Like, you know, it's not a good enough reason. Okay, so people might judge you or people might say things about you, but how will you feel about yourself if all these opportunities have come your way and you don't take them? Like, this is what you've worked towards without maybe knowing it all the time, but this is what you've been building up to. And if you don't take it because you're so scared, is that acceptable? Like, is that an acceptable way to live your life? And it never was. Like, I just kept coming back to that. But I'd have to have that conversation with myself sometimes daily. Like, that's not something you just say out loud once or say, you know, work through to yourself once. I think when things are that deep rooted, when fears are that deep rooted, then you have to remind yourself of it. I had to remind myself of it right up until the start line.
I think what's amazing is so you've got this coach on board, John Hampshire, which is fantastic. So he believes in you. He can see your potential. You've headed out to America to bike solo, first time over in America, doing the Arizona Trail race, and then you're figuring out your mindset and you're thinking about this goal of cycling around the world. I mean, the fastest woman to do it, and obviously that's fantastic. You're getting your mind right, which is brilliant, but the reality of the situation, like having this dream, I want to be the fastest woman to cycle around the world. How do you turn that into reality? I mean, money. Where are you starting with money and sponsorship and pulling a team together? Like, how did it come together for you? I know that's a big question.
It's a good one though, because it's that like getting an idea from your head to get into the start line. Like, that is the hardest bit. That was the hardest bit of the whole trip that year, from deciding and saying it out loud to John that I think I'm going to do this. I never said I am going to do it because I would always need a bottle out that I could. But it was the hardest year. So sponsorship to start with. So I didn't have any sponsorship. I didn't have any money for the trip until February or March before I left. So, and I was leaving in the June. So I was like telling people that I was going to go do this, and I didn't have any money to do it. And I was getting so many rejection letters. And I mean, I'd never ever applied for anything like this before, I'd never put myself out there to ask companies for money. So I didn't quite know how to sell myself, but Jenny Tuff was really, really helpful with that actually. And she sort of gave me a helping hand with how to put a proposal together. And even when I had a really good proposal, I would just get so many rejections. And in the planning in my head, I was like, oh, they'll definitely say yes, because I had all these contacts and I thought, well, this is an amazing thing. Like, surely you'd want your name to be on this. But the reality of it was that, although in my world, like, I'd been building up these miles and, taking part in these races, it's such a niche, like bike packing races, like I'm doing one this weekend and there's like 11 of us on the start line. It's not mainstream what sponsors are looking for, It's like, yeah, you're doing well in your own field, but how many other women are in your field? You know them all. So that was a shock, sort of got me. I didn't expect that process to be so hard. So I started sending out letters and making contacts and sending emails out in the November. And like I say, it took that 5 months before I was getting anywhere. I needed 15 grand. So £15,000 I thought would get me all my flights, accommodation for a third of the time, and if like food obviously was going to be a biggie, and fixing my bike, stuff just to have something in reserve for that, insurances. So 15 grand. So it was a lot of money. Like, I didn't have 15 grand to put into it. So it was like, I need to, fish around to try and get this money. So the Adventure Syndicate were the first sort of corporate sponsors to get on board. They came on board, and they gave me some of their race team budget that they'd got from other corporate sponsors and brands. And they were like, right, you can come on board with the Adventure Syndicate. You can have 5 grand towards your target. And obviously then I had kit sponsors as well, because that was a math, like you can imagine, the amount of kit that you sort of need. So by getting the Adventure Syndicate on board and riding like with the Adventure Syndicate, then that meant that like my bike, I would ride a Shand bike, and Endura were going to be on board, and Apidura. So it just, it sort of it worked out really well for me, like so well for me. So that was 5 grand. So I had a third of it at that point. And then I got another couple of corporate sponsors on board. So I managed to get 8 grand in the end through corporate sponsors, 8 or 9 grand, 8 grand, I think it was. And then, so that was like halfway there. And then I had this bike. It was an amazing bike. I'd won it on the Blackburn Ranger scheme the year before, where I'd applied to be a Blackburn Ranger. And then they give you like amazing kit. And I had to cycle around the Highlands and, tell stories about it. So it was like perfect. And they give me this gorgeous Niner bike. And so I raffled it off. I put it on social media for like 3 weeks and just said, and that was me like coming out saying I want to cycle around the world to the public. So I'd only done that in March and I left in June, but I thought about it the previous year. So it just shows you like how long a process it was before I could actually say it out loud. Like at that whole time I was working through the demons of like not being good enough and not being able to get this off the ground and looking really silly if I don't. So when I did that was it then, once it's on Facebook, it's on Facebook, isn't it? So I'd put it out and I said, I've got this bike, it's worth like, I don't know what it was worth, 4 grand or something. I've ridden it for a year. I want to raise money to go around the world. And this is what I'm going to try and do. For £10 a raffle ticket, you could win a bike. You could win this bike. And I raised like 4.5 grand or something, like something ridiculous, in 3 weeks on that bike. It was amazing. And every message and raffle ticket that came in was just like cementing the idea that I actually, people believe in me. People believe in an ordinary person having an opportunity and the chance to go and try something like extraordinary. So it was a biggie. It wasn't just the money, it was the fact, the belief that people were putting in me by buying that ticket and writing that message. It was, yeah, and I didn't expect that. I was in it for the cash at the end of the day, but I got something far deeper out of it. It was incredible. And then we had like a big fundraiser in Inverness, and before I knew it, that was it. I had I think we raised 16 grand altogether. So I had the money, but that was a massive piece of work. That was the biggest part of it, I think, because it took from the sort of end of October to March to get it all together and to get the money to go.
Is there a set route that you have to follow that in order to get the world record, or are there certain requirements that you need to be doing?
So the Guinness World Record rules, they've got some rules in place that you have to follow for it to be around the world record. So you need to travel in an easterly or westerly direction, and once you choose that direction, you have to stick in it. Like, it can vary by 5% or something, but it has to be in that direction. And you're also not allowed to go back on yourself and travel over the same latitude again. So you have to be really careful of that. Like when I was flying from Beijing to Australia, Perth, so if I'd ridden all the way to Beijing and then started in Perth, Australia, then that would be me re-riding the same latitude. So I had to stop like 80 miles west of Beijing, and because that was in line with Perth, Australia. And if you got to a certain point and were like, oh, I've not done enough miles, like you're not allowed to go back on yourself. So that's that rule. You need to, it has to all be like your own power. You're not allowed to draft any vehicles. You're not allowed to use any private vehicles like private jets or anything like that to fly to the different continents. You have to pass through two opposites in the planet. So mine was New Zealand and Madrid, Spain. And you have to cycle for 18,000 miles. I think I did 18,500 just like to make sure. And you need to, your whole trip distance has to be the same as the circumference of the Earth, which is like 24,900.
So did you follow the same route as the previous record holder, the Italian lady Paola Giannatti?
Oh, you said her name so well there.
I said it so badly, but thank you.
Oh, that's so much better than I say it. So no, I didn't take the same route as her, but I did take the same route as Mark Beaumont. So Mark Beaumont had done the round the world in 80 days the previous year. He'd done it supported and to see if he could get around it in 80 days. And I'd spoke to Mark about the route like quite a bit before I left. And I mean, there were some places like Australia, Australia and New Zealand, it's just like bomber. That's the way that you're going to go. That's where you get the most miles. Even coming across like the Americas, so like coming from, Anchorage, Canada over to Nova Scotia, that's like makes sense. It's like the perfect way around. You get the most miles out of it. But when it came to like going through Asia, so coming across Europe and going through like how to finish that leg. So I went to Beijing, but actually I really felt like, at first I felt like going down through it, like down into India, so through the stands, and I soon realised that was going to take a lot of time. Like that would have been, getting through all that borders and the road conditions. But then I thought, oh well, maybe I'll go through Kazakhstan and into China, into the west of China, and spend like a longer amount of time in China, because I really didn't want to go through Russia. I just thought it's not going to be like, the road's going to be really busy, and I didn't like the sound of it so much. But after, I spoke to Mark a bit, and we spoke about wins, and his team, like they'd been planning that for years, and they'd done a lot of research into that route. So I was like, I'm actually probably best. Like I have not got that team of people around me or resources to look into the way that he did, and it is a record attempt. So that's what I went for. Went through Russia, which I wouldn't have done if I hadn't spoke to Mark. I mean, we started in different places, and because his was a supported run, then he didn't have to worry about finding food or shelter or anything like that. So I had to make sure it was going to work for me, and I had to take detours in different places so as I could fill up with food and stuff like that. But
what was life like on the road? Like, talk through like a typical day.
Oh, it was amazing. Life on the road was incredible. Like, so basically I was looking to ride for 15 hours a day. Like that was my main aim when I got up in the morning, to ride for 15 hours. But I mean, that didn't always work out. I think I averaged 13 and a half hours every day around the whole world. So like some continents were much easier to ride longer days than others, and depending on the weather. But I would aim for 15 hours. So I'd get up, I'd try and get on the road for about 8 in the morning. And it just depended what you were going through. So I'd like how often you'd stop or where you'd stop, but I'd always try and get coffee within like the first 50 miles. If I had to wait 100 miles for coffee, I was sometimes quite grumpy. And I would just get into this really special rhythm and place, that I was down on my tri-bars and just taking it all in. And I would ride, like I would try and stop a couple of times a day if I could, like if there was, shops around. But sometimes in the more remote areas, it would be like a one time a day stop. I found it really hard if it was busy areas and it was built up, and I had to pass shops or cafes all the time because I was always hungry and I was always tired. And I was like, if I had to, every time I saw somewhere, I would say, will I stop? And then I'd have to go through this process. Well, no, you can't stop now because, you've only been riding for a certain amount of hours. So I would have to carry on. But I found that process quite hard of not stopping when there were places. So if I was riding somewhere remote and I could only stop once a day, it actually suited me because then I didn't have to think about it. I could just turn the pedals. And I would just listen. I would do lots of things. I would listen to a lot of podcasts and music. My friends and family would WhatsApp me with what was happening, tell me what was going on in their lives and their world, and I could just listen to that as I was riding along, and I would send messages back to my friends and laugh and things, but not just hi, how are you? Just really in depth. Here's where I'm at today. It's quite nice. I've been listening back to them and I'm like, wow. And telling them about what I'm seeing and the places that I'm going through. I had a lot of interactions with people as well. Things would happen and I would meet somebody in the morning, and then, you just cycle off and you sort of think about that person for quite a long time afterwards.
How did you stay focused on the bike? 13 and a half hours, aiming for 15 hours a day cycling. You're tired, but you've got miles that you've got to get done. You're under a lot of pressure. I don't want to say the world is watching, but Facebook is aware of your big challenge. How did you maintain that focus?
I think I really, really wanted it more than anything, which helps. And I would get, when it was tough, I would be like, well, actually, where would you rather be right now? There was never a point that I was like, oh, I'd rather be here, or I'd rather be at home, or I'd rather be in my bed. I mean, sometimes I'd rather be in my bed, but quite often when I thought about it logically, it was like, oh, I wouldn't actually rather be anywhere else right now. And I would just deal with things. So to keep going for that amount of time, you just have to be kind to yourself. You have to listen to what your body's telling you, and you have to not beat yourself up for things and be like, okay, I'm not feeling very good in the bike today. Okay, what will help you? Do you need some music? Are you just a bit sad? Well, if you're just a bit sad, that's okay to be a bit sad, and just be almost talking in the third person or thinking in the third person.
Why did you want it so much? Why was it so important to achieve this goal?
Wow. I mean, I think by working through that thing of being are you good enough to do this? Are you should you be here? Do you deserve a place here? I guess it opened up quite a lot of maybe maybe demons that you have anyway, and feeling maybe you're not quite good enough in certain situations, so it became really personal, because I'd opened up this sort of this conversation with myself about actually what do you want. And I think by the time that I was out there, it was just I had to see it through for myself. I wanted to, but I had to, this was now a self mission, can you do this? I suppose I felt like I'd been judged quite a lot for, and I don't know if it's true, I don't know if I had or not, but, you can feel like you're judged for your life choices, or I didn't go off to uni, I had LAC when I was really young, and I was just these sort of I felt like I could often be stereotyped, I felt judged for certain things, and I didn't think it was fair, because it was hang on, that's my life choices and they're amazing to me, so it doesn't mean that I'm not good enough for other things. So I suppose there was a lot going on. There was probably a lot driving me of that, proving to myself that I could do this and that, I was good enough to do this. But it wasn't the main drive. The main drive was wanting to. The main drive was quite a positive one, it was wow, you have got the opportunity to do this for one. Like, I would just lift my head up from the bars sometimes and just be like, wow, like, look at you riding across the Nullarbor, you know, and you've got this gorgeous bike and you've got all these amazing people behind you and supporting you. And like, you know, all you've got to do is ride in that direction, like again and again and again. And so I felt really lucky to be out there. And when it did feel tough, or it did feel, you know, like, I mean, I never questioned why I was doing it, to be honest. When I was out there, I was just doing it. I was just doing it, and I felt lucky to be doing it. And sometimes that would make me laugh because it would be pouring down with rain, like the rain would be bouncing off the ground, and I'd be cold and hungry and shivering, and I'd be like, yeah, you're so lucky, Jen, aren't you? And just like have a little giggle at like how ridiculous it was. But yeah, still I felt pretty humbled by it. I mean, some of the places I was riding through, there was so much poverty. I felt a bit disgusting being there with £15,000 that, you know, just to see if I could do it. It was like, oh man, you know, and there was people there that had no choice, like they had no choice what to do with their spare time or spare money or anything like that, because they were out working in the fields and then they were selling their fruit to vehicles passing by because that's what they needed to do to keep their family alive. You know, so suffering on the bike was put into context every single time.
With suffering on the bike, how was your bottom? How was your bum?
So my bum was pretty sore until Australia. By the time I got to Australia, it had sort of bedded in. But up until then, it was, so I basically went through a massive saddle saga on the build up to it. So I tried out about 7 different saddles, and that's like quite a long process to try them all out and give them all like a fair amount of time. So it took me right up until Easter to pick a saddle that I really liked. So that was April and I was leaving in June. And at that point, I'd got a tester saddle from SMP and I tested it out and it was amazing. Like I was away with the Adventure Syndicate over in France and it was just like perfect. It's like, great, I'll get one of these. And I kept putting it on my list, like, oh, I must get the saddle, I must get the saddle. And then I left it really late, so I didn't actually get the saddle until about 2 weeks before I was leaving. But I was like, well, I know that it fits me, so it's fine. But of course, the test saddle was well bedded in, whereas my brand new saddle was not bedded in. Like, it was not as comfortable. And so I had a bit of saddle sore. And I think just like the heat, you know, like the heat out in Mongolia and China, it was middle of summer, so it was 40 degrees sometimes. And yeah, I think that's harder to deal with. But I took 2 pairs of bibs with me. So I'd ride in a pair and have a pair drying and washing, like wash them in sinks if I was in a garage or service station, and have them drying. And then I would have some Sudu cream and I would have some talcum powder. Between that 3 things, I sort of managed to maintain it and just like keep on top of it.
You mentioned like Mongolia riding in the heat. I mean, you know, I believe you did have some big weather challenges out there. I mean, how do you sort of plan and coordinate with the weather and the extremes of temperature, and what was that like?
The extremes in temperature it was probably actually the biggest factor. It had the biggest effect on me, the weather, on my mood, on my ability to move fast, on, you know, how much I could rest. So, and I didn't take that into account. I don't think I did factor in that time very well for that thing. So going across at 4 different continents, so it was different. It was a different season on each continent. And I think when I got to Australia and New Zealand, and it was like the dead of winter, and I'd sort of, obviously I knew it was going to be winter, but it was like Australia, you know. It was Australia. I couldn't believe that they were going to get any like bad winters in Australia. I just thought it'd be a bit dark, but actually it was like unseasonably rainy and cold, and like it was down into -3 and 4 at night, and so bivvying out, and it was wet, and I just had a bivvy bag with me, so it was like resting when I was out there was really difficult. And I would, I'd be out and about, and like if I couldn't find somewhere to sleep properly at night, and dry off, like so if I couldn't find a motel or anything to dry off, then I'd just be getting out a wet kit, putting it back on for another 15 hours the next day. And like it just wears away your body, like my feet were a mess, and my bum, and just like, yeah, you start running yourself down quite quickly. So that was quite difficult to keep warm and to keep enough energy. That was probably the hardest bit of the whole trip out in Australia. That was my lowest, I think.
Did you ever have a day off?
No, I didn't. I thought I could rest when I was flying, but because my budget was so small, actually, like I didn't really rest when I was flying because I always got the cheapest seats that I could. And so, yeah, you're not cycling a bike for 15 hours, but like you're squished up on this tiny little seat, and you're not resting at all. It's like
I'm just thinking you'd probably be on like the cheapest flights to Australia that I know are always like China Eastern Airways.
Yeah, exactly. I think the worst one was, so the Australian one was pretty nice. when you score one of the front seats and you've got so much leg room, it's unbelievable. And so I felt that one was quite comfortable. The one to Alaska. So I did from New Zealand to Alaska, and that was my biggest flight. And in my head, it was like my biggest rest. And I'd been quite sick in New Zealand, so I was like, right, I have to rest on here. And it was horrendous. It was like a mega bus in Sky for God knows how many hours. It was just, yeah, it wasn't a nice ride.
I'm just thinking, what a difference it would have made being in business, being able to lie down flat just to have those 20 hours of sleep. I mean,
it would have been so good, but I couldn't afford it, and I couldn't. Everyone was on at me for like just put out a Just Giving page. Like people were getting in touch with me and saying like, can we give you money for this? And it was that thing again of like, I felt so lucky that I was able to do this, that the thought of taking people's hard-earned cash for me to do it didn't sit right. So I was like, nah, I would refuse. I'd refuse money. I'd refuse to put a Just Giving page out or a donation page out. And so I probably could have got better flights, if I'd let people do that. It just didn't feel right.
Fair play. Yeah, I think I would have been like, no, Just Giving, please, get me business class flights. Like, oh my God.
Business class, I know.
Or I would have put a tweet out as well, like, hey, cycling around the world, can you upgrade me, please?
No, I mean, I should have asked the airlines, really, shouldn't I? But all these things were like, everyone had great ideas for things they could do to, to save money and to get these things. But like I was still working full time. I was training 20 hours a week. I was fundraising. I was like, juggling so many things before I went away, and all like the worrying and working through if I'm even good enough to be doing this. So getting in touch with the airlines, I suppose it was always on my list to do, and then I just didn't get round to it because there was so much to do. Yeah.
Do you know what? I get it. Like life gets in the way, and planning and doing everything else while you're working a full-time job, and looking after your son and looking after your son, and just
it's mental, isn't it?
Well, like people have no idea, like the sponsorship, like I mean, how many letters or emails or phone calls and like designing of media packs, and it's just,
I know,
people just don't see this side of things. So I really do, honestly, I do get where you're coming from.
Yeah. I needed someone to come in, I think. I needed someone with that skill set to come in and be like, right, tell me where you're going and what you need, and I'll get this out. Like, that's what I needed. But, and, maybe there were people like that in my life, but even...
It can be hard to ask.
Getting that together to put that out can be quite a big deal sometimes, can't it? Like... every part of that process. At that point, I was so mush, like my brain was such mush. I needed somebody to recognize it and come in and take it off me.
And it's also not easy, especially like when you're out on the road, like to do things like the social media that actually you need to do in order to drive the media awareness and to get,
Yeah.
you know, people aware of what you're doing. You know, the last thing that you probably want to do when you finish cycling is send the tweet, do the Instagram selfie and write the comments about the day, or film bits of it. It's just, it's so mentally and emotionally and physically draining. It will be taking it out of you so much.
Exactly.
I mean, massive congratulations. You did break the world record.
Woo!
Take us back to Thursday, the 18th of October, 2018. Give us the stats. Tell us how you were feeling. I mean, yeah, what was it like?
Oh man. So I had been riding for 36 hours as I was heading back into Berlin. So I had 36 of the funniest, most bizarre, insane hours of my life. And they were just like, the people had come out to meet me for the last section. I knew like all my family and friends were going to be at the gates. People were in touch with me. I was like falling asleep against walls and fences and like just I was a mess. I was such a mess. I was like, right, just have to finish this. Like every mile I felt of that last day. And it was a little bit, I felt like I've spoke to my mum about this, and she said it was exactly the same on their end. It was like when I cycled under the Brandenburg Gate and was like heading towards like all my family, it was like they were all cardboard cutouts. It's like it was so bizarre. Like I'd thought about it so much, and I was, delighted to see them, but it was so enormous. The whole thing was so enormous that I was like, I was in shock, I couldn't feel them. Like I couldn't get my head around what was happening. It was just like, I just spent this like 4 months in my own head on my own mission. And then all of a sudden it was like, boom, everybody was there and it just happened. And yeah, it was funny. It was really funny. I mean, we drank a lot of champagne. We drank a lot of champagne that night. But yeah, it was bizarre. And actually, I was like that for days. I don't know. I was probably like that for weeks. Everybody around me was over the moon, super excited, buzzing, like absolutely buzzing. And I was like, like I don't know what to say to you. I don't like I could do interviews fine. I could do interviews easy, but when it came to like people close to me and when it came to more personal things, I found it really bizarre. I was like, I don't know how I'm feeling and I don't know what I should be feeling. And like looking back on it now, yeah, it was just shock, wasn't it? Almost like a sort of trauma. But yeah, a good one.
124 days, 10 hours, 50 minutes, a new Guinness World Record. Just absolutely incredible. I mean, honestly, massive congratulations. Phenomenal what you've achieved.
Thank you.
Did you get the adventure blues afterwards? Or when did like reality come back and sort of bite you and just be like, oh, okay, like, did that happen?
Yeah, I think like because I was out there, so that was like a completely self-supported run. So I didn't have anyone booking anything for me. I did everything on my own out there. So I'd gone from, and actually the lead up to it, you're putting a lot of hours in the bike by yourself, and people around you are supporting you, but they don't quite know how to support you, or it's just like it's a lot of you. It's a lot by yourself, and you've almost created this sort of island for yourself, if you like, that you're on, that you've just done this, like you're by yourself. There's no one that you can 100% speak to that gets it completely, because you were the only one that was out there. You're the only one that's done it your way, sort of thing. So it did feel quite lonely. I think when I came back, all that sort of stuff hit me a bit, and I felt like I wasn't. I don't know if it wasn't that I was as happy as everyone else was about it. Like I was delighted about it, obviously, but I suppose the emotions were just a bit different for me. And So I felt like I felt like I was trying to speak to people, but I couldn't maybe communicate exactly what I meant. And obviously people just didn't get it. Like, how would you get it? You know, it's bizarre. You've just completed this, like, your life goal that you'd devoted all this time to, but actually you're a bit like, oh, I don't quite know how I feel about this. And I think up until just after Christmas, it was quite, for like, that was about 3 months. I remember craving, just like really wanting everyone just to be normal, just get back to normal, and just like, you know, enough of this round the world stuff. Let's just, let's just get back. I was just craving normality, and people around me weren't being normal, because they were so excited about it and so hyped about it. And I was just like, no, just back to normal. And Lach really helped with that. My son really helped with that, because I think it doesn't matter what your mum does, like, she's your mum. And it's just like, well, then, now you're back. What's for dinner? And just, just so down to earth, like, didn't change once in the way that he saw me or the way that it was just really grounding. It was lovely, and it's what I needed, as soon as I came back, just to sort of settle me back in. I didn't get that feeling of like, oh, I wish I was still out in the road, and I can't believe I'm back here. It was almost the opposite. Like, I didn't want to be back out suffering and being tired and being hungry and cold, and I'd had enough. I'd had enough of that. Like, my body was exhausted. So it was just a bit of a bunk down, I suppose, for a few months, and not really doing very much. And definitely, like, I would go out on my bike, and if it started raining, I would just come home. Or like, I'd ride somewhere and I'd just get the train home or get a lift or something like that. I was just like, did not want to be cold at all, or suffer in any way.
Reflecting back now and knowing what you know from doing that experience, do you think the record can be broken even further? Whether that's having like a more of a support team in place to help out with those little bits and bobs, whether that is flying business class or first class so that you're sleeping on those 20+ hour flights. Like, do you think it could be quicker?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've got no doubt in the next couple of years, maybe even next year, that record will be getting broken. I mean, I took 20 days off the record. It's like, I've just shown that that's more than possible if you do it all on your own, and you're, I mean, I was just about to say an average cyclist. I know an average cyclist doesn't cycle for like 150 miles a day, but an average endurance cyclist, I think that alone, just seeing that I've done it in 124 days, will mean the next lassie that goes to do it, her sights will be much lower. Her sights will be like, right, I have not got enough time to play with here. I've got to be really tight on certain things. Whereas I had loads of time to play with. Like, I wanted to do it in 110 days and 120 days, and then like I did it in 124, but I still broke 20 days off the record. Almost like the tighter your deadline is, then the tighter you are with certain things. And I think some days when I was out there, and who knows, because maybe that's what, that helped me keep going, is because I could slacken off some days and be like, no, you need sleep more than you need anything else, and go and have that extra like coffee or whatever. I definitely spent too long in coffee shops. So hard to leave again. I should have trained that, not my legs, before I left. But like you say, that flights, that resting, if somebody had a better budget and they could sleep in hotels more often, if somebody had, like, I wanted to do 100% self-supported, so I booked all my own flights, I did all my own logistics. I mean, if that's important to you, then I would say do that, definitely, because I'm quite proud that I can say that I've done that. Like, that, that I didn't have a support team. It was me out there doing that stuff. But obviously, like, the more support you've got, then the quicker you can do it. But if somebody could go out with no support team and just be able to ride an extra half hour a day than I was doing, and beat the record by quite a lot.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Yeah. What do you think the biggest learning was from this whole experience of cycling around the world?
I think the biggest learning has been that actually, for me, getting to the start line, actually being able to pull it off, not to complete the ride, right? Because so many things could have happened out there. Like so many things that were out of my control could have happened out there. So getting to the finish and completing it, I mean, that's insane. That feels amazing. But actually getting to the start line and being fit enough and organized enough and have everything in place to have given myself the best possible opportunity, you know, that is, I feel like I can pull anything off now. And I don't mean in a physical sense, but I mean, if I work towards something, if I put my sights on it, and, I feel like I could pull off any project. I feel like things are possible. Like, I don't see barriers anymore in the same way that I used to. I just see opportunities. I don't look at things and be like, oh, that's going to be a bit tough. I can break things down and be like, I can break things down. So I broke down a massive barrier getting to that start line, and now I've done that. I can look at things and just take them down into bite-sized chunks and be like, yeah, that is possible to do, because if I can get myself to the start line in such good shape, then anything is possible.
I'd love for you to share more about the Adventure Syndicate, what they do, and the fact that I think you're a company director now, is that right?
Yes, I am, which is so exciting. So we are a collective of female endurance riders who go out and, we ride some pretty long and some of us ride pretty fast and, but we all just have this main sort of aim of coming back and sharing stories with people about what we've done, and always in the hope that will encourage them to sort of look at their own boundaries and what they might be what might be possible for them. So we don't shy away from failures. We don't shy away from talking about our fears going into things. We don't put ourselves on pedestals, if you like, to say that that we're different than because we're out riding these long or fast distances, that we're actually any different from anyone else. We want to close that gap. We want to close that gap right down. And so particularly women and girls can look at us and think, hang on, like they've come from the same place as I have, and they had the same dreams and aspirations, and that's how they got there. So we do a lot of work, like that's our main work. So we share stories, and we go in and run courses in schools and workplaces and in communities, and we set up events for people to get involved with, and training camps, and yeah.
Tell us more about the podcast that you have.
The podcast is so cool. So when I was away, you have to keep a diary for Guinness World Records to tell them with like your daily mileage and what you saw that day and who you met and all this stuff. And I managed it for about a week, and then I was so exhausted. Like, you're riding. I was probably riding 20 hours in the first week, so I was so eager. And then you'd lie in whatever ditch you were sleeping in, and you'd be like, oh, now I've got to write my diary, or you're having a laugh. I couldn't even keep my eyes open for it. So it didn't last very long. So what I decided to do was keep audio diaries. So it was so easy for me just to speak into my phone. I could do it when I was riding. I could, keep hold of the stats and talk about what was happening. So as I was doing that, they were getting the audio was getting put back to Radio Scotland, and they were doing like a weekly thing on my journey, which was really cool. But when I got back, one of the lassies who works at the BBC, Penny, she was like, oh, you've got a podcast in here, Jenny. You've definitely got a podcast in here. And so we listened through so I basically just went with her, and we did this massive interview when I got back, and she has weaved the audio diaries with the interviews that I did when I was like a week back or something like that. And and made it into podcasts. So there's like 8 podcasts of me get going around the world, and it gives you quite an insight. I mean, when I was saying them, they were for Guinness. It was for me. So I'm not like the way I describe things, I cringe when I listen to them sometimes because I'm like, oh, why did you say it like that? But it was just because I was so exhausted and I wasn't thinking this is for other people. Like this is just for me. So yeah, that does give you a proper insight into what was going on out there for me. Yeah.
Can you imagine listening back in years to come?
I know.
Because you will have forgotten so much already. And it's what I mean by forgetting is, I mean, it's the little interactions, the little tiny moments that happen that just sort of accumulate and just becomes, like, oh, I cycled across Australia, but like what it was like day to day, or the weather and the wildflowers or the animals that you met or the people along the way. So, absolutely an incredible way to share your journey. And I'll be making sure that I include all of the links to the Adventure Syndicate podcast, the Jenny Graham Around the World podcast, and all of those episodes.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. That's great.
So I want 2 more things from you, Jenny. So I'd love to do some quick fire questions with you, and then we'll get to, at the very end, we'll just get some final words of wisdom for everybody. So yeah, let's mix things up a little bit. Are you ready for some quick fire questions?
Okay, come on then.
Okay, AM or PM?
Oh, PM.
Ooh, what time do you go to bed?
Oh, like as late as possible.
What time do you wake up in the morning?
As late as possible.
Do you have to set an alarm?
So I have to set an alarm to get me. No, well, I sort of wake up between 7 and 7:30 normally, as long as I'm not like going to bed after midnight. But naturally, like when I was going around the world, my daily routine would be, getting up at like 7 or 8 and then riding until like 2 or 3 in the morning. So I do quite well at nighttime. I'm faster on the bike and I've got like a better headspace in the morning. I'm like, oh, groggy, and probably because I stay up so late. But yeah.
No, I think that's fascinating. Now, I think that I know the answer to the next question, but tea or coffee?
Oh, coffee all the way. Only good coffee though, if not it's tea.
What's your favourite coffee brand then?
Oh, so we've got a lovely coffee roasters in Inverness, and yeah, so I like to go in there and get some Highland roast.
Ooh, lovely. Are you reading a book at the moment?
I have got a stack of books sitting beside my bed waiting to be read, and I've not picked any of them up for so long. I've listened to quite a lot of audiobooks. I've been away all summer on my bike, and so audiobooks are the thing that I sort of listen to, and books are more for winter.
What was the last audiobook that you listened to?
The last audiobook, I knew you were going to ask me that. The last audiobook, so when I was away, the Kevin Bridges autobiography, I listened to that, which was excellent. I love Kevin Bridges. Yeah, it was funny.
Do you have a favourite movie?
Of all time?
Yeah, all time.
Of all time, my favourite movie is probably Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I'd like the old one. The old movie of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is amazing. I love it.
Why that movie?
I think the amount of imagination that's gone into it, and it's like that classic story of, Charlie's a total underdog. Like, what was the chances of him winning the ticket? And then he does, and the whole thing about it with his family all being behind him like that, and then just going into the factory and doing it properly. And yeah, I suppose it's the hope around it, isn't it? It's quite nice.
Favourite music? Is there a particular type of music you like listening to, a song or a genre that you're like, yeah?
No, I don't stick to one, because I suppose I listen to so much of it on the bike that I need to always be changing it. What's newest on my playlist just now? I just watched this on Netflix series. I'm not sure how good it was, but I got totally obsessed with it. It was The Money Heist. And the soundtrack that goes with that, I've been listening to that quite a lot because it was quite good. But I don't know, it's got loads of different artists on it. But yeah, I listen to quite a mixture. Just depends. Oh, hello. Our dog's just come in. Hi.
What's your dog called?
She's called Bella. She's saying, hi, Belle.
Hi, Bella.
And so she's still a total novelty. We don't say hi to each other anymore. We just like speak to the dog all the time.
Oh. So, what's your favourite type of food in normal life and favourite food when you're on the bike?
Okay, favorite type of food in normal life. I love vegetarian dishes. So like I love lots of it and like lots of nice veggies and like nice sauces and things. Like if I'm cooking it for myself, it's normally quite simple like that. I think potatoes are probably like my all-time favorite food just because they're so versatile. Like you can have them with anything and like I eat a lot of beans, sort of like butter beans and stuff. So a bit of a mix. And then when I'm out on the road, my top food stuff, like, I mean, I eat so much rubbish when I'm on the bike. There's no need for it. I mean, a pork pie goes quite a long way on the bike. Like, there's so many calories in it. Condensed milk as well. Condensed milk on bananas when you're on the bike is really good. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Favorite piece of kit or gear?
I got this amazing light last year for the trip. It attaches to my dyno hub, so it's a sine wave beacon. Beacon? Is it a sine wave beacon? And so it's a front light, so it attaches. So whenever I pedal, it comes on. But there's got a little switch in the back of it, and it's got a USB charger, so then I can charge anything on it as well. And it was just like bomber when I was away. It just worked perfectly, and I relied on it so much, so I didn't have to stop all the time to charge my thing. So yeah, that's probably one of my favourites.
Oh, fantastic. I'm going to have to ask you, does your bike have a name?
Before I went away, I was out with like the Adventure Syndicate girls, and we just got our new shans, and we were like, oh, they're almost like, they've all got superpowers because we do these amazing rides on them, and like they see us through. And I was like, yeah, mine's is like Night Rider. This is Kit from Night Rider, and she'll just find me places. And so it was going to be Kit. Kit was my bike's name. And then when I left and I was riding, I was like, Kit would turn to Kitty, and I was like, oh, I don't really like it. She doesn't suit it. And then I just started calling her Little Pig, like out of Babe. I would just be like, night, night, Little Pig. And she suited it. I was like, and so I just started calling her that. And I didn't realise how silly it sounded until I came home and said it out loud. And I was like, oh, I wish I stuck with Kit.
No, cool. I love Little Pig. Night, Little Pig. Are you a mountains person or a beach person?
Mountain all the way.
And what do you do for rest and relaxation?
Go into the mountains. I actually do. I love just going and camping and not like doing activities, just being there and maybe taking a book and, just like cooking up some food and just sort of being out in wild places. Yeah, I think that's when I'm most relaxed.
And do you have a mantra or a quote or words that you live your life by?
It's like sometimes I do and then I forget about them. I don't really have a mantra or quote, but I often like that thing of before making decisions, like that thing of being like, well, is that good enough? Is that a good enough reason? If I'm thinking about quitting something, or if I'm thinking about, usually if I'm thinking about quitting something, I'm like, is that a good enough reason? And if I think it is, then I'll be like, yeah, that's fine. But no sort of mantra.
And Jenny, a final question, you'll be pleased to know. Final words of advice for our listeners, for women who want to be more adventurous, who want to take on their own challenge, whatever it may be. What words would you like to leave them with?
For me, taking this on, I mean, as soon as I started saying it out loud, I started almost like I was holding myself to account. So if it's something that you really want to do and you start telling people, and I don't mean like start plastering it all over social media and, making a big deal out of it, because that can be so much pressure that then you don't do it. But just like, start small with people that you trust, and you almost build like a bit of a community around it, and you get that support that and sort of push forward that you might need. And it definitely helped me whenever I was feeling like, oh, I'm not sure if I can do this, then just having people around me that knew that I was going to do it and maybe knew that sort of pressure that I might be feeling. And, it really helped. It helped make it feel like not a stupid idea. So saying it out loud for me really helped. I think when you say things out loud, like one of two things happen. You either realize what a ridiculous idea it was and then like you never mention it again, or it starts sort of attaching itself to you and then you start being like, yeah, actually, I do really want to do this. So yeah, that's definitely the type of person I am.
And Jenny, where can people find out more information about you, follow along with your adventures and your cycling challenges?
Yes, so on the Adventure Syndicate, we've got a website and we've got social media sites as well on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. So the Adventure Syndicate is the best place to find out what we're all up to.
And what's your next challenge? Do you have one?
So I'm just back from Colorado. And so I was riding out there this summer. I tell you what my next challenge is. My next challenge is this weekend. I am racing the Cairngorm Loop in the Cairngorm. So it's just over the weekend. So it's 180 miles, 84 miles, I think, off road in the Cairngorms as fast as you can. I've looked at the weather and it's raining and snowing. So it was going to be a bit grim, but there's some lovely people doing it. So
it's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. Can I just quickly check? Was there a film made about your round the world cycle or not?
We're currently making that now, and the film should be out in November.
Woo!
Yeah.
Will you be writing a book as well?
Oh, if I stop for long enough to, I will. But yeah, getting the podcast and getting the film out has been sort of priority, and then hopefully we'll get on with the book.
Oh, brilliant. Jenny, thank you so much for coming on Tough Girl Podcast to share more about your incredible cycle and your life and the journey that you've been on and what you've learned along the way. You've provided so much inspiration and so many top tips. Absolutely inspiring.
Oh, it's been lovely being on chatting to you, Sarah.
Hey Tribe, a massive thank you for listening to that episode with Jenny. What an absolute inspiration and what an achievement. I thoroughly enjoyed chatting with Jenny, and obviously I'll be making sure that I share all of the links to what we've discussed throughout the podcast. They'll be available in the show notes at toughgirlchallenges.com, so please do go check it out. I will be making sure that I also put the link to the Adventure Syndicate podcast, so well worth going to listen to Jenny's. It's like a 7 or 8 part series about her time on the road. Absolutely incredible. Well worth listening to. Equally, I will keep you updated of when the film comes out and when the book comes out, but what an incredible inspiration. A couple of other episodes to recommend to you, so you can take a listen to Sarah Ooten, who's also a member of the Adventure Syndicate. You can listen to Emily Chappell, and you can listen to Kate Rules. But there's loads of incredible cyclists on the Tough Girl podcast, so a whole variety of different episodes for you to listen to. As I say, all the information is available at toughgirlchallenges.com. Massive thank you to all the patrons. Massive thank you for you for listening. I really do appreciate it. If you could leave a review on iTunes or the platform that you listen on, that would be absolutely amazing. The more reviews that are left, the more people are more likely to hit that play button and hit that download button. Equally, if you could just tell one friend about the Tough Girl podcast, that will be an amazing way to spread the word. And what I'm trying to do is to increase the amount of female role models in the media. I want these stories shared. I want these stories heard so that when women hear them, they start to think, and this is what I want you to start to do, is I want you to start to think, hold on, what can I do? What challenge am I going to take on? Now, it doesn't have to be going and cycling around the world, but this challenge has to be personal to you. So if you haven't done it already, sit down, grab a piece of paper and start writing down every single idea you have. Don't put any limitations on yourself. Don't worry about the time. Don't worry about the money. Just think about what's important to you, what motivates you, what drives you, what's going to get you out of bed every single morning, what's going to drive you to do the training and help you to grow and develop as a person, because only by challenging ourselves are we going to get there. So you need to have a challenge. You need to have a purpose in your life. So please make sure that you have a purpose, that you have a goal, and those dreams you've been thinking about, start turning it into reality. Have an incredible day wherever you are, whatever you are doing. Give it your all, give it 110%, and please believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself because I believe in you. All right, take care, lots of love, and I'll be back with you next Tuesday for another awesome episode of the Tough Girl Podcast.